Welcome to In Her Voice, a podcast created for women who listen to and live by their deepest wisdom, their inner voice. This was made for you, the woman who feels pulled to more, to lead, to create, to dream, and to be a world changer. My name is Kelly Covert, and I am an inner voice coach. Join me here each week as we explore what it means to reach for your inspired potential, all while honoring your worthiness each and every day. Hello, this is Kelly, and you are listening to In Her Voice. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for taking time for you, because you are important. And taking time for you really does make a difference, not just in your life, but in the lives of those around you and in the lives of those that you're taking care of. Today, I have a wonderful conversation all about reliable personal power with Martina Barnes. This is so juicy and so yummy and a little bit challenging, a lot challenging maybe, in the best sort of way. But before we get to the interview, I just want to invite all of you that are listening here, if you haven't already, to join me over on Instagram. I'm at Kelly J. Covert on Instagram, and I've really been digging in there, and I'm working on creating a community. I'm working on having conversations about what it looks like to say yes to yourself, what it looks like to understand that you can do things for yourself and still be a good mom, that you can run a business and still be a good partner, that you can take care of yourself and still be there for your family. These are all of the things that are really coming up for me there and everywhere. And we're having great conversations on Instagram. So head on over there if you haven't already and give me a follow at Kelly J. Covert and shoot me a message, say hi. And I'd love to hear from you as always. I always love to hear from you. So before we get into our interview, let me tell you a little bit about Martina. Martina Barnes speaks and teaches about women's empowerment in a way that has her audience engaged, laughing, and nodding in understanding. She teaches women practical ways to shift how they show up for themselves and express reliable personal power in every area of their lives. She is an experienced psychotherapist, life fulfillment coach, and master intuitive who helps high-achieving women transform the areas in their lives where they lack reliable personal power. A sought-after speaker, media contributor, and author, Martina's first book, The Meditation Doctor, A Practical Approach to Treating Common Ailments Through Meditation, has been translated into several languages. Her second book, The Reluctant Mystic, is currently in revision, so that's something that you can certainly look forward to. So let's get right to my interview with Martina on reliable personal power. Martina Barnes, welcome to In Her Voice. I'm so excited to have you here today. How are you?
Good. Thank you, Kelly. I'm equally excited to be here as well. I love the work that you are doing with women. And I want to say that the smile on your face is like radiates your entire being.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm smiling as you say that, and hopefully you can hear it in my voice too.
I can. You know, it's to me when I saw your picture on your website, I could tell right away this is a very open-hearted woman, which speaks to me as a sister soul.
Well, thank you. What a lovely way to begin our conversation. I so appreciate that. And it's funny that you say that because everyone knows I always go to my guest's website and poke around and do a little detective work before my interviews. And I too was so struck by your picture on your website.
Oh, thank you.
And you know what it was is I just felt like, oh, she's real.
Thank
She's
you.
real. And that really came through in those images. So for everyone who's listening, you'll have to make sure you head on over to Martina's website, maybe before we get done with the interview, so you can have a picture of her in your mind's eye.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, so today our theme is reliable personal power. And when I first heard those three words put together, that is a combination of words I've never seen put together. And yet it resonated with me. I was like, oh, yeah, yes, we need to talk about that on the podcast. So let's start there. When you talk about reliable personal power, what do you mean?
So I'm so glad you loved the phrase. It took about 5 months to work with it and to work with my branding coach who you have interviewed on here, Juju Hook.
Oh,
And
right.
yes. And we came up with that after about 5 months. And I'll answer your question in a second, but I want to tell you it was so interesting because a couple of months after we came up with that phrase, I was working with one of my clients, and she said, you know, Martina, the deeper we go into the system, the more reliable my personal power is. And I thought, oh my gosh, she's my poster child.
She's already speaking the language.
She's already speaking it, absolutely. And I think about internal power and external power. And some individuals have external power in the world, and they may have power, they may have influential power out in their communities or their families or their careers, workplaces, and not know anything about their internal power, so to speak. So I believe that our most authentic, our most real power comes from within us. And it sounds like you believe that as well, in terms of that inner voice guiding us, and that inner voice is part of our profound wisdom. And I see all of us as having a kind of spiritual bus that we ride on. And ideally, we want our true real self to be driving that bus. And yet we have lots of different passengers that are on the bus. You know the passenger of the perfectionist, and I do too. Mm-hmm. And I know I have a passenger who's a people pleaser and a nice girl. And these passengers hijack the driver's seat. And when that happens, we are not able to access our true power. Does that make any sense?
That is such a beautiful visualization of exactly what happens.
Oh, thank you.
Like that resonates with me so deeply. And you know, when you were talking about the different kinds of passengers, yes, I have a perfectionist on board my bus, but one that really stuck out to me was I have a good girl on my bus.
Oh, yes.
And she's like, this is different from the nice girl, because the good girl follows all of the rules, and inside she seethes and gets resentful of everyone because she's doing that all of the time.
Yes.
and yeah, like I feel it when she hijacks me now. And you know, I think I'm going to be very transparent and say, like, I'm still deep in the work of staying in the driver's seat, if you will, you know? And so I'm just curious for you to go deeper in that, and sort of like, how do we make sure everyone stays in their seats so we can keep on the path of where we're supposed to be headed?
Yes. And I will be equally transparent and say this is really an ongoing process for me as well. Now, am I more in the driver's seat than I was in my 20s or 30s or 40s? Absolutely, because I've embraced that personal development path, and I love that you said you can tell, you can feel it when the good girl is in the driver's seat. Mm-hmm. And I do think sometimes even our entire chemistry can change. I think that we're accessing a different part of our brain when a different passenger jumps in instead of self. And I'm going to fill out this picture a little bit more, and then I will see how I can answer the question for you. So I think about the GPS on the bus is our intuition. Except for many of us, our intuition has had its wires crossed, and we have a hard time differentiating what our true voice or true intuition is. I think about the fuel that's fueling the bus, and in my opinion, the right octane fuel is courage. We have baggage on the bus, and that's not a problem because everybody needs to be able to bring their baggage if they're traveling, but we may need to unpack that baggage and find out if there are some emotional burdens we need to release. And then what if we also took on some baggage that didn't belong to any of our passengers, but maybe belonged to our mother or to our father? And so this process of being able to stay in, for self, to stay in the driver's seat, I think if we look at some of the qualities of self, such as compassion and curiosity and creativity and courage, you might have other words to add to self. Your audience may have other words to add to self. That if you are traveling down the road in your bus and you come upon a situation at work, or maybe it is a relationship, the first thing we have to start doing is noticing what it feels like when we're in self, when we're really fully in our high self, which I think of that as being maybe when we feel like we're having an incredible day and nothing is bothering us and the skies are blue and there's a few fluffy little clouds and the birds are singing and we feel really well resourced. Do you know that feeling?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. And so if we can identify like what's the feeling or feelings like somatically and emotionally that come with really feeling like we are our best self, and what kind of thoughts do we have when we are in our best self, then we can start to really become a detective and say, something feels a little different. I suspect maybe my people pleaser is driving right now, or she might be partially driving, or maybe my good girl has hijacked the entire bus, has tied up everybody on the bus and gagged them. And then, you're going down this rocky road with all of these potholes, and it can lead to a kind of a frustrating and even dangerous place sometimes, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And so our very first step, I believe, is to use our intuition to start to ask that question, is this really self? Is this really self who's in the driver's seat right now? Does that make sense?
It does. And I think my question for you is, when people, including myself, when I talk about intuition, when my guests talk about intuition, I think sometimes it's easy to be in this place of knowing how to connect with that because it's something that we have practiced and that we teach.
Yes.
And so I find myself too, I fall into sort of coachy language.
Yes.
I just, tap into my inner voice. I, see what my intuition is saying. And I say those things, and in my mind, I know what that actually looks like for me.
Yes.
But I think sometimes when people are coming to this for the first time, or even, they've tried it and it hasn't worked before, they didn't quite figure it out. They're like, okay, well, that's great. How the heck do I do that?
I know.
How do I, ask my intuition, is this my real self? Like, what does that even look like?
That's such a great question, and I think that it's going to look a little bit different for everybody. And if we go back to that feeling state of how does it feel when I'm relaxed and open, I don't feel like I have an agenda. I feel that I'm in a state where my nervous system feels really good. These are all conditions that help us start to begin to hear our intuition. And so for me, I cultivate that and have cultivated across the years through getting quiet. And it's often that we hear a voice that's breaking through the chatter, all the mind chatter, and that voice feels like the truth, or that voice feels like it has some wisdom. And at the same time, we may then have another voice come in to try to quiet it down and say, don't listen to that. So for some, they feel intuition in their body. It's like, oh, this feels right. Have you had that experience where somebody asks you to do something and you have a very clear no? You just get this very clear no, but you ignore the no and you say yes. So I think in that case, it's like, oh, our body just gave us the answer. The answer is no. Or if we are around someone and we feel scrambled emotionally, then it's hard for us to hear that intuition. My brain is like going in lots of different directions at once because I'm thinking, okay, how do I break this down even further? Which is my challenge because I've been following my intuition for so long.
Well, and that's just it. I mean, I think that is part of, what people struggle with is
Yes.
it's like, it's that first entry point. And, you mentioned back a little bit ago something about the somatic experience. I love that word. And really what you mean by that is feeling it in your body.
That's right.
And so I wonder, do you have an example of, like what that feels like in your body when you connect with that intuition? I mean, you said a little bit about like when someone asks you to do something and you feel it as a no, but what does that mean? What does it mean to feel something as a no or feel something as a like hell yes in your body?
So I think about when I teach my intuitive intelligence courses for professional women, and I have them do this exercise. And I have them imagine a situation where somebody asks them something and everything in their body is screaming no. And often they will report that there's a feeling of tenseness, a feeling of like contracting into themselves, or maybe a feeling of anger that comes up, or a feeling of a wall. Those are often words that are used when it's a no or a hell no. And then when there's a yes, it feels like an openness and an excitement and an enthusiasm and like, yes, I want to go eat that ice cream. It's this pleasurable experience. Although sometimes our intuition does tell us things we don't want to hear, so it's not. So sometimes sometimes we get a message and our body is saying, no, I don't want to do that. But it is the right thing to do. And I think that just takes experience. Like if you have a sense that it's a yes, whatever this yes is, and you feel scared, a little bit scared, but excited at the same time, then that's a sign that you've just tapped into your intuition.
Yeah.
Right? Because I remember when one day when I was out of college, I was bicycling out on the countryside with my friend Patrick. And he said, don't you ever get this feeling sometimes that you just want to keep cycling for days and days and days? And I said, yes. And he said, wouldn't it be wonderful to just like start here in Tennessee and cycle across the coast to California? And my body said, yes. And the next morning I woke up and I felt both excitement and fear and trepidation in my body. And that was a signal to me in the beginning. Oh my goodness, I'm onto something big and I'm excited and I'm scared at the same time. Right, but that's different than, oh my gosh, that man over there gives me a really frightening feeling as if I'm not physically safe.
Yeah, I think that this distinction is really good to point out, especially if you struggle with perfectionism. Because oftentimes our inner voice will say, do this thing. And then suddenly our analytical brain will turn on and be like, okay, what are all the things involved with doing that? How do I do that? Like we get caught up in the how, and then we see that it's complicated or that it might not work or that we don't know exactly how to do it. And so instead of doing it, we're like, oh, well, no, it's too much. It's just too much, or it's too scary.
Yes.
That is different. That kind of fear, I think, is really what keeps us from stepping out and being brave. And, I encourage people to recreate experiences in order to see how they feel inside of their body too. Like that. I think that's another tool that we can use to learn what a yes and a no. And my inner voice sometimes tells me to wait.
Oh yes.
Also, like sometimes I don't get a yes or a no. Sometimes I get a like, well, sit with that.
Sit with that, yes, which is so much wisdom. And the fact that you can pause and listen to that and say, oh, it's not a yes or a no, it's a pause. And what you're describing, you've probably heard this phrase, analysis paralysis.
Oh, yep.
Right? And so that's when we know, oh my goodness, the intuition to me doesn't really come from the mind. It comes from a deeper place in your heart and in your soul. And our mind can help us take action, or it can block us. Either way, right? Mm-hmm. And so what you're saying of, oh yes, I'm helping folks recreate experiences so they know what it feels like in their body, because that feeling in your body is really, it's very reliable once you know how to read it. And in psychology, we would call that an anchor. We might say, hey, I want you to have a memory when you were with your young child. What is one of your favorite memories with your young child? And describe that to me and tell me everything that you're feeling in your body as you do that. And that person describes all that feeling of goodness in their body. And that to me is very much mimicking the somatic experience of intuition.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right? And yet some people get their intuition in an auditory way. They hear a voice saying XYZ. Or I think you are like I am. I'm very visual. I'll give you an example. I remember being at a party probably 30 years ago, and I looked over and I saw a very attractive man, very charismatic. I mean, he was just dripping with sex appeal. And I saw him holding a beer in his hand. And I looked at him and I looked away, and all I could see was that beer in his hand. And I stopped to pay attention to that image, and then I heard a voice say, "That man should not be holding a beer." And as it turned out, I started to date him. And it turned out, it took me a couple months to figure out, oh, he's an alcoholic. He had been on the wagon for 7 years, and then he fell off. And so, that's an example of information coming in different ways, right? And I think kind of going back to that question of the how we know it's intuition, and if you're really a highly empathetic person, I think sometimes these individuals have the hardest road to hoe, because if you're highly empathetic and sensitive and were not taught kind of where you end and where somebody else begins, that makes it even harder to know, am I feeling my own feelings, or am I feeling Kelly's feelings, or am I feeling Jane's feelings? So that's kind of a backwards way, or a backdoor way in, which is learning how to start to feel just what you're feeling. I don't know if that's helpful or not.
No, it is helpful, and I think for everyone listening, if you identify as someone who's highly sensitive and empathic, I think just asking yourself those questions.
Yes.
Like, that's a powerful question, and I love powerful questions because they make us look. They force us to look in the right place for the answer, right? So the powerful question of, is this mine?
Yes.
Is so revealing and can release us from so many things that we hold on to that aren't ours, that we have no control over, that we don't have to own as and take on as our own burdens.
That's right.
And that's what to me feels very powerful, when I get to decide what I will carry with me.
Absolutely. That when it becomes a choice. And I was speaking with a woman earlier today whose husband died, and her children are adults, but she was saying she felt like she was holding for her husband who died all of the things that he won't ever get to live out in his life. And I thought that was really interesting, understandable, and very interesting that she took on that. But the beautiful thing is that she also recognized that that was just like one passenger on her bus.
Yeah.
Right? And that question of is this mine or is this not mine, also reminds me of another question, which is, do you know the difference between what is inside and what is outside? Like, what is inside that you're tracking, and what is outside that you're tracking in your environment? Because until we differentiate that, it's going to be very hard to be able to hear our voice, because our voice is coming from within us.
That's right.
Not the environment.
And I think this is where the reliable part comes in, right? Because the only way for our power, our personal power, to be reliable is for us to practice at it.
That's right.
And to get good at it, and to get good at driving the bus with all of the other stuff that's going on in the background. I mean, I just picture, like my kids' school bus.
Yes.
And I always think to myself, how do those bus drivers do it? I can barely drive with my 2 kids in the car.
Right?
But that it's really about practicing.
Yes.
And so I'm curious to know, for you as someone who teaches this and puts it into practice and into your own life. What do your daily practices look like? Because I know for me, it's like I do certain things so I have those skills at the ready. And then when I'm out and about, they're there for me to use. It's almost like the
Yes.
difference between, I'm a musician, so it's the difference
Oh,
between a rehearsal and a performance.
yes.
In the rehearsal, or when I'm at home, I'm practicing in my studio. I'm going over the ways that I can access the things that I need to access. And then when I'm in the performance, it's there. It's
Yes.
there for me. And so I feel like there are certain things that we can do to sort of prepare us, so to speak. So what do you do?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, when you said about being a musician and so forth, I don't know why this silly image came to me, but I thought about the very first thing I do every morning when I wake up. I grab my coffee and I meditate. And I
Mm-hmm.
meditate anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. Now, I know if you have young kids, that's not necessarily a luxury you're going to have. But if I do that meditation, to me, it's like I'm a handy woman and I put on my tool belt and all my tools are in order. I know where all the tools are that I can reach for as I go throughout my day. If I don't
Yes.
meditate, I'm like, where did I put that socket wrench? And is that screwdriver like under the driver's seat? Where's my hammer? Like everything's kind of scattered. So for me, that's what pulls me in to a place where all of my tools get organized. Like everything comes on board because I'm calming down the nervous system. And because when we get out of bed, to get out of bed, we have to use the sympathetic nervous system, right? But we don't want to stay like in that heightened place the whole day. So when I meditate, I get that balance between kind of my parasympathetic and my sympathetic nervous system. Then I take my dog for a walk at some point during the day. And this is when my eyes start to feel my intuition coming in a different level. So getting into nature can help a lot of folks. So even if you meditate, you're not necessarily going to be getting messages while you meditate. It might be that it happens when you get in the shower. It could be that you exercise and that helps get you in touch enough with your physical body, which is another thing I love to do. And then I take my shower and then it comes pouring in. And then one of the most important things that I do is I monitor how much external information comes in to me, right? Which means,
Yeah. Can we just say that in
right?
a different way?
Yeah,
Meaning your input, like how often you're on the
that's
phone and
right.
how often you're looking at social media and how often you're checking your email or texting or whatever, you're monitoring that input.
Exactly. Exactly.
Huge. Huge. That's huge. I mean, I don't know a single person who, number one, doesn't struggle with that.
Yes.
And number two, hasn't benefited from being sort of like more vigilant about the inputs.
Yes, and we even have apps now, right? Like your little iPhone or your iPad will say, hey, you reduced your screen time 3 hours this last week. And then you can puff out your chest and feel really proud. And I think even intuitively, we know that it's like, wait a second, I don't know if it's good to have my child having screen time 24/7, right? It's like it also takes you away from being able to read your internal systems,
It
right?
really does. It
Yeah.
really does. So, all of these things that you're talking about, meditation and movement and, different things like this, these are all the things that I consider fall under what I call kinder habits.
Yes.
These are habits that we do for ourselves so that we can be connected to our inner voice. And I believe the more connected we are to our inner voice, the better we feel. The
Absolutely.
better we feel about who we are, the more worthy we feel like we are able to step into our innate worthiness instead of feel
Yes.
like we have to earn it. All of these things, they're so powerful. And, I will echo one of my kinder habits. And this has been happening. I've been doing this since, I think, the beginning of the year. This is in early February that we're recording this. I set one of my kinder habits in January to be that I would not go on social media before 9 a.m.
Ah,
And, when I ask my inner voice, okay, what do I need to do to feel XYZ? That's my process. I ask. I know I want to feel at calm and peace. I know I want to create. I want to feel creative. I know I want to feel connected. How do I feel that way? And so she said to me, don't go on social media before 9 a.m.
I love that.
And, like, why is 9 a.m. important to me? Like, is that a random time? Well, for me, I have a similar routine. I get up in the morning, I make my coffee, I get my kids off to school, whatever, take the dog out, and then I sit down and I do my journaling and I do some meditation and I plan out my day. And if I go on social media before that, it's not the same.
Yes, and I actually remember Juju telling me something like that. My branding coach you interviewed, who she realized that she was getting more and more kind of destabilized.
Yeah, that's a good word.
Right?
Yes.
It's hard to regulate ourselves emotionally and physically if we're getting too much input when we haven't even had time to fully wake up our brain and our body.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, 100%. And so, all of the things that we're talking about it goes back to feeling empowered
Yes.
as we walk through our daily lives. Like, as you call it on your website, and I love this, being a well-resourced woman.
Yes.
Having all of the tools available to you and being able to use them anytime you need them.
Exactly. And it does come down to practice. And I love that this is the work that you're doing with other women. And I also love the journaling piece that you have. And I would say that for decades I did journaling and I moved away with it. I moved away from it because I became impatient.
Yeah.
But I love how much you're resourcing women, and so many of us as women, we're taught to be in an outward focus, to serve others, to give to others, support others. Maybe I just said that, and we can't really lead ourselves until we turn to the quieter practices.
It's true. It's true. That stillness is required. Martina, I love this conversation so much. And I really hope that if anyone has, like, if the people who are listening have one takeaway, it is figure out what you need
Yes.
to be connected to your intuition. Do some of the things that we talked about. Try, thinking of that wonderful time when you were happy and, this time at childhood, and feel how that feels in your body. Start to be aware of how a no feels in your body. And, you can check in. Like, you don't have to wait for somebody else to ask you a question.
That's right.
To feel those. Like, you can ask yourself those questions and see where the answers pop up in that, as you say, somatic experience. Oh, I love that.
Yes.
I love that so much. Martina, why don't you tell people where they can find you and learn more about what you do?
You can find me at Martina Barnes, at Barnes with an E, like Barnes and Noble, martinabarnes.com. And you can read more about reliable personal power, and you can get my free ebook on boundaries, which was my first step to being able to listen to my intuition all those many moons ago.
Yeah, that's especially good for people who have a people-pleasing
Yes.
passenger on their bus.
Yes, absolutely. Don't leave home without it.
Yeah. Well, we will put links to all of those things in the show notes so you should be able to just click the link right in whatever podcast app you're listening to get to all of these things and see what Martina has to offer. And of course, now I'm knowing that you have such a deep practice of connecting with your intuition. I can't wait to hear the answer to this question.
Okay.
And that is, what is your inner voice saying to you these days?
Eat more dark chocolate.
Ooh, I love your inner voice.
It really is. My intuition is telling me more than ever what a pivotal time we are at in the United States, what a pivotal time we are at in the world at large as we're still in this pandemic. And you need to know your inner voice now more than ever. It is the greatest asset that you have that money cannot buy, because if you know your inner voice, no one will control you.
That is the truth. Martina, thank you so much. This has been a lovely conversation, and I really appreciate you being here and sharing your deep wisdom with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. It's such a privilege and an honor and a delight.
I wonder, when you think about reliable personal power, do you feel like you can tap into that? Do you feel like that is available to you? And if you don't, number one, no judgment. And I don't just mean no judgment from me, because you can always count on no judgment from me. But more than that, I mean no judgment from you. We are all on our distinct and unique paths, and things come our way exactly when we need them. I really believe that. And I hope that you can take this message of reliable personal power and really apply it. Apply it in your life, apply it in your business, apply it in your family. Because when we as women are saying yes to ourselves and understanding truly what we are fully capable of and how powerful we are, watch out. Watch out, because your life will change. The lives of the people around you will change. Your world will change. And I think that's why we're here, to lead lives of purpose and impact. Remember this. You are here for a reason. You matter. Your desires, your goals, your vision is not an accident. It is inside you for a reason. You are worthy.